The Championship just never fails to disappoint, does it? Let's jump into this one. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. We've had quite possibly the most unpredictable weekend of Championship football so far this season, and we're going to do our best in today's video to try and unpack it all. We've also got the midweek score predictions to go over in the second half of today's video as well, so do get them in the comments down below. And also, some of you may have seen that we did put a question out on the community tab earlier on today. Make sure to go ahead and check that out. We're going to be doing sort of like a Q&A to celebrate when we do hit 30,000 subscribers, so if you want to get any questions in for that, head on over to the community tab. But before we do jump into anything, I want to give a big shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. As always, you can find a new OneFootball app in the top line of the description down below. Really handy to have with all the football that we've got going on at the moment. Obviously, we've got more matches coming up in midweek. The Championship schedule is just absolutely relentless at the moment, and if you want to get live updates to your phone, read up on the opposition that you're playing in the week in a little bit more detail, OneFootball is the place to stay on top of everything. And before we do jump into anything, let's take a look at the prediction leaderboard and what things are currently looking like. So in the main league, we do have a new leader at the top. It's Championship Pro, who has gone top on a grand total of 86 points. Massive game week there. If we then go into League One, I have to say the comeback from myself is on. I find myself 7th in League One now after having a pretty decent result. So I picked up 10 points this week in terms of getting some of my score predictions correct. So I got a pretty decent one. And then this is how the League 2 table is currently looking like. So still very close in here. It's Football Fan AR, who's currently sitting top of League 2 with a grand total of 63 points. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. And so starting out with Friday night's game, Watford beating Derby by 2-1 in quite an interesting match in the end. And you have to say, with the 3 points here, Watford have put themselves back within contention for automatic promotion, especially with both Brentford and Swansea dropping points this weekend. In many ways, it was their perfect weekend of football for Watford. Now, in the end, the difference in this game probably came with the quality in the first half. It was two quite quick-fire goals from Watford. The first time they really sped up the play was that first goal. Saw down that right-hand side, blistering pace, pulls the ball back across. There's a bit of fortune in the end for this one, but João Pedro just about sticking it away. Will Hughes obviously then bags against his former club, but I think the big decision comes towards the end of that first half when the Cullen Kazan-Richards goal is ruled out for, believably a foul in there. I can't see it myself when I watch back on it, and I think that Derby have been incredibly hard done by there. Should they get that goal back, different game coming into the second half. And credit to Derby with the way that they did line up for that second half. I'm sure they made Watford fans very nervy in those final stages because they certainly threw absolutely everything at it. As soon as they got that goal back from the own goal, they really tried to force that equaliser, and you could probably make an argument for them deserving that. But in the end, Watford just about held on to it, and like I say, a massive 3 points for them given the circumstances. Next up, we then had Coventry beating Brentford by 2-0, a result which certainly shapes things up at the top and bottom of the Championship. Now, that's 3 consecutive defeats for Brentford in the league right now. They're struggling with injuries. Obviously, the biggest news coming into this one was that there was no Ivan Toney. I think that Brentford are a completely different team going forward without him. I think in the second half especially, you could just see them getting more and more frustrated. They were forced to having shots from unusual positions that they wouldn't normally do. They're normally quite good at working it into the box, but without that focal point up front, obviously, Forrest's still a very capable striker, but you very much have to play to his strengths and adapt your game plan to him a little bit more. Yeah, Ivan Toney's a massive loss, but I thought that Coventry were fully worth their 3 points here. We've mentioned that there's real quality in this squad. It was just about unlocking that. Obviously, they themselves were on a bit of a difficult run of form. The first goal from the penalty spot, it was about time Coventry got a little bit of luck and had a penalty themselves. Obviously, they've given away quite a few so far this season, but the second goal, really poor from Brentford here. Obviously, Raya gets a lot of praise for his distribution, but he's dropped a bit of a clanger with that one. But Tyler Walker actually takes the second goal very well. And then, like I say, after that, Brentford just looked very frustrated for that second half, especially. With the current injuries and the quality that's missing from that squad at the moment, they just need to start grinding out the results, you feel like, But is this Brentford squad capable of that side of the game? I mean, the next few weeks, I think, will be quite telling for Brentford's season. After that, we then have Bristol City losing once again. Barnsley picking up all 3 points. I think that, to be honest, the 1-0 probably flatters Bristol City a little bit for this one. It was Barnsley who were knocking on the door for pretty much the full 90 minutes. Eventually, they get their breakthrough in the second half. Carlton Morris, who finds himself on a brilliant run of form for Barnsley at this point in time. It was a little bit of a scrappy goal in all circumstances, but I mean, Bristol City had no spark going forward about them whatsoever. Never did they try and get on the front foot or anything like that. The game plan was to completely limit Barnsley, and when Barnsley get that lead, there was never the feeling that Bristol City were going to have, you know, a resurgence and try and find their way back into this one. But as of recording, it does look as if Nigel Pearson is going to be coming in at Bristol City. Bristol City fans, get your reaction to that in the comments down below. If you look at their recent run of form here on screen now, I mean, it's a dismal run with the odd decent result in there here and there. And this run pretty much stretches back to the end of November. That's how bad things have been for Bristol City recently. I rate the appointment of Pearson. I think that what Bristol City are certainly in danger of happening is if this sort of run continues, we're seeing the gap between mid-table and the bottom three just ever so slightly creeping closer and closer together, as some of those sides in mid-table have been dropping off recently. Pearson, you'd think, will be able to galvanise this group of players and at least stabilise them so that they'll have a solid finish to the season. For Barnsley, still very much got that top six hopes alive, especially with both Bournemouth and Reading losing this weekend. And then after that we had North End losing 4-0 against Cardiff. This was, by far and away, for me at least, the worst we've been all season here. I mean, we gave them a penalty within the first couple of minutes. It was a soft penalty for me. I think we've had a couple of those decisions which have gone against us so far this season, but my biggest gripe with North End this season is when that first goal goes in for the opposition, it completely sucks all the belief out of us. Our record of getting back into games when we concede first has been absolutely shocking so far this season. You can see that by how the second half starts. You know, we can see within a matter of seconds, 27 seconds is all it took for Cardiff to get the ball in the back of the net in that second half. Our afternoon was summed up by the bizarre penalty situation. Gordon goes down from what was a little bit of a soft penalty. Gallagher, who's always so reliable from the spot, misses. He's then fouled by Aidan Flint. We get to take another one. Ched Evans steps up. His penalty is then saved by Phillips, who's got a really brilliant record, by the way, at saving penalties. A couple minutes later, Cardiff go up the pitch. Once again, it's awful defending from North End. What Liam Lindsay's doing to allow the ball to go over his head. Now, he's been decent for us since coming in so far, but he drops an absolute clanger in this one. There's a mix-up between him and the goalkeeper. Iverson actually does well to save Kiefer Moore's initial effort, but Marlon Pack follows it in for 3, and then, you know, our day summed up by Cardiff's 4th goal. So the annoying thing about this is Cardiff never really had to work for the 3 points here. We gifted them goals at every opportunity we could, but obviously Cardiff are riding high on their confidence at the moment, and everything went their way this weekend. You know, with both Reading and Bournemouth dropping points, I think they've got a real strong case for making the top 6 now. For North End, the tide is turning, I feel like, with a lot of fans this weekend, especially with what they make of manager Alex Neil. I said during the January window, after it had just concluded, that we as North End are probably going to have to be patient because of the massive turnover of players, but performances like that, it makes you hard to keep backing them, doesn't it? I myself am still of the opinion that Alex Neil deserves time. I think that his track record with North End over the last few seasons has bought him at least that time, but I can see where fans' frustrations are coming from, because that wasn't good enough. And then after that we had Huddersfield beating Swansea by 4-1. I mean, it's typical of the Championship that both Swansea and Brentford have a bit of a wobble at the same time, but I mean, credit where credit's due to Huddersfield. We've been pretty harsh on them, and I think rightly so for their form throughout 2021 so far, but I'm giving nothing but praise in this video here today because they were absolutely superb. Now, the warning signs were there from quite early on. They had a goal ruled out for offside, but Fraser Campbell tucks his away 22 minutes into this one. We've seen Huddersfield start games fast so far this season. I think that's been one of their real characteristics so far. It's just been a question of them not being able to see out matches. And when Horahan gets Swansea back into it right on the stroke of half-time, brilliantly taken free kick, I'm sort of thinking, alright, here we go again. It's going to be another one where Huddersfield collapse in the second half and Swansea get over the line. But maybe we should have seen this sort of performance coming from Swansea, because we did say in their previous game against Forest, they probably did ride their luck quite a fair few times in that game, but for the best defensive side in the Championship to concede 4 goals, I mean, that's a turn up for the books here. But Huddersfield took their goals brilliantly in the second half. Lewis O'Brien absolutely smashed home his goal in the second half. Nice little bit of link-up play for Holmes' first one, but the second goal from Dwayne Holmes, absolutely unstoppable. I mean, he is a player with real quality who could make all the difference for Huddersfield in terms of one of their additions that they brought in January. He was absolutely fantastic, as was Campbell, who led the line really well for this one. So Corberan got this game spot on. Swansea, just have to write this game off and move on now. They can't afford this sort of thing to manifest like Brentford have allowed for their recent form. So yeah, they'll go again in midweek, but what a result that is there for Huddersfield. Millwall against Wycombe ended up being a goalless draw, game of quite a few clear-cut chances really. Millwall were plugging away for a lot of this one, but Wycombe defended their box really well. David Stockdale came back into the starting line for this game and actually had a decent game, and he dealt with everything that did come his way. Now, Wycombe had quite a big shout for a penalty appeal in this one. I think that with some of the other penalties that we saw given across the Championship from this weekend, Wycombe got very unlucky that that one wasn't given there. It was Pearce with the foul, but obviously adjudged not to have done that in the box. For me, I mean, I thought that was a penalty. So in such a low-scoring game of few chances, a decision like that can make absolutely all the difference. And in the end, the point doesn't really do Wycombe all too many favours. They're now sat on 20 points, so 11 from safety. They do have a game in hand on a few of the sides above them, though. All round, just a bit of a frustrating afternoon for Millwall. Next up, we then had Norwich beating Rotherham by 1-0. Now, Norwich will take this absolutely every day of the week here, obviously, with both Swansea and Brentford dropping points. The perfect weekend of football for them in many ways. It was once again Buendia and Pukki linking up for the goal, but Todd Cantwell deserves a bit of credit, I think, for the sort of dummy run that he made off this one. But yeah, nice finish from Pukki in the end. He got in behind that Rotherham defence a few times and probably could have had a couple more goals for himself. But with Rotherham, there's no real shame in losing this game. Obviously, their season ultimately isn't going to be judged on playing the top of the Championship away from home. It's going to be on other games, which are going to be the deciding factor for Rotherham this season. But to be honest with you, they didn't do all too badly in this one. They obviously limited Norwich to just the one goal and had their fair share of chances going forward. They did have the ball in the back of the net, but that one was ruled out for a foul. It was a little bit of a soft one, fairly similar to the goal that Derby had ruled out against Watford, albeit there was maybe a little bit more in this one. I think it was Barlaser who maybe just had an arm on Tim Krul. Obviously, you can't really make any contact with the goalkeeper in those sort of situations, but they hit the bar as well, and when they did go forward from set pieces and things like that, had their chances, and on another day maybe could have snatched a point from this one. But Norwich, as ever, professional in getting the job done and extending their lead at the top. After that, we had Forest continuing on their impressive run. They beat Rovers by 1-0. Things just not falling Blackburn's way at this point in time, are they? Now, we sort of spoke about Forest after their goalless draw against Bournemouth, which, you know, given all circumstances, was a decent point for them, but we maybe spoke about them being a little bit more adventurous going forward. I think we've seen that from them a lot more lately. This game, they probably deserved more than the one goal they got in the end. It was Alex Martin with a bit of a deflected goal, but really nice sort of looping one over the goalkeeper. He's been a real bright spot whenever he's been on the pitch for Forest so far this season. But yeah, several other chances that they had to wrap this one up. I mean, in the second half, that Lyle Taylor chance, I think it's Cyrus Christie with the original shot, which cannons off the post. It falls to him. The goalkeeper's in no man's land. He's beaten by this point, and somehow he puts that one wide. Now, obviously, ultimately it doesn't matter because Forest have gone on to win this game, but Blackburn by that point were knocking on the door, you know. Blackburn obviously have the golden opportunity to get back into the game. Adam Armstrong with the penalty, which is well saved by Samba, but should that goal go in, I mean, there'd be a lot of angry Forest fans looking at Lyle Taylor with his miss previously. But yeah, good win for Forest in the end there. Blackburn, I mean, the penalty miss pretty much sums up their run of form lately, doesn't it? Things just aren't clicking for them going forward, and to be fair to Armstrong, he's really looked like their only sort of goal threat going forward lately. Next up then to QPR, who continued on their impressive run of form as they beat Bournemouth by 2-1. Now Bournemouth, I mean, they had their fair share of chances in the first half. Shane Long had a really good one-on-one, which was well saved by Seny Dieng, but ultimately, I mean, the first goal they concede is from their own doing, really. Playing the ball out from the back, Johansson latches onto a loose ball and finishes well. Long does get Bournemouth back into the game, but Todd Kane wins this one late on for QPR, who continue on their immense run of form. I mean, they're perfectly sat in mid-table at the moment, 10 points off the playoffs and 10 points off the relegation zone. I'm a bit annoyed that my club, North End, is going up against QPR next in midweek because, yeah, like I said, they're playing with this real spark about them at the moment and this real belief which has come back in recent weeks. Now, Bournemouth, obviously, the big news coming out from there is that they've appointed Jonathan Woodgate as their manager now until the end of the season. Bournemouth fans, I want to get your reaction to this one down below, obviously. Things didn't work out for him at Middlesbrough, but it's fair to say that this is pretty much on the opposite end of the scale in terms of a managerial job and what's expected of him at Bournemouth. I'd say I'm a little bit pessimistic when I come to this one in terms of how I think he'll get on with the job. Obviously, a few teams below Bournemouth now, I'm sure, will be really licking their lips at the prospect of this one. You know, Cardiff, especially with some of the experienced managers that are just below them at this point in time. But there's undoubtable quality which is in that squad. It's just a question of can Woodgate get them over the line and into the top 6 this season. It's going to be a very interesting one. Next up then we have Middlesbrough beating Reading by 2-0. Now in many ways this was the perfect away performance from Neil Warnock and Middlesbrough in this one. They hit Reading in the first half with each of the goals. The first one coming from a set piece, Del Fry heading it back across goal and Fletcher finishing it well. The second goal brilliantly dispatched by Bowler, absolutely launches this one into the roof of the net, and then for the second half just see out the game really professionally, have a couple of breaks on the counter-attack and things like that, but Reading couldn't really get a sniff on goal for this one. Now for Reading, their home form has been a little bit of an issue for them recently. That's now their 3rd consecutive loss at home. What I think is going to be big for this Reading side is the next 2 games, so in midweek and next on the weekend, they're facing Wycombe and Rotherham both away from home. I think if they get 6 points from those 2 games, they're suddenly in a much more healthy position, because at this point in time, I still think there's maybe 2 playoff positions to play for. You know, if Reading continue to tail off a little bit, then their obviously playoff position could be in jeopardy a little bit. I still think they're in obviously a much more secure position than Bournemouth are, but it's a 5-point gap at this point in time between Reading and themselves dropping out of the top 6. So yeah, those next 2 games against sides currently in the bottom 3 I think is going to be quite telling, but big result there for Middlesbrough, who still very much are in the hunt for the top 6. Next up then to Sheff Wednesday up against Birmingham, and an absolutely huge result in Birmingham's season. Now I think that ultimately this game probably does hinge on the red card for sure. Up until that point, very few chances for either side. It was fairly level up until that point, and I think that with the red card it probably gives Birmingham the impetus from there to go for it a little bit more, and obviously they then get their rewards. It was Jeremy Bella who created this one of Birmingham's more inventive players, and Scott Hogan getting on the end of it. Now I mean, this just goes to show what a bonkers league the Championship is. I think that if that red card doesn't happen, you could probably make the argument that this one maybe ends up fizzling out into a goalless draw or something like that. I really do think that that was the real game-changing moment. In terms of the actual red card, the first time I saw it I thought it was a little bit harsh, but the more times I watch it, the more I think, okay, yeah, he probably has to go for that. You know, he comes off the ground there, that's adjudged to be reckless, and it leaves Sheff Wednesday in quite a damning position after this one. You know, had Birmingham lost this game, I really didn't see any way back for them, but with them winning it now, once again it blows the relegation race absolutely wide open in the Championship. Wednesday's next game is up against Brentford, who they themselves are struggling for form, but I really can't call this bottom 3 at the moment. It's absolutely bonkers. And then to wrap things off, we had Stoke beating Luton by 3-0. That will do Stoke's confidence the world of good. Well, one of the obvious critiques that we've had of Stoke in the second half of the season has been that sort of lack of goals. So to put 3 past Luton here will do their confidence the world of good. And they still have, you know, an outside chance of sneaking into that top 6 come the end of the season. Now, I mean, we saw some bad defending this weekend over the Championship, I think it's fair to say, but Luton's defending in this game was right up there in terms of some of the worst. I thought that all the goals were avoidable watching them back, to be honest with you. They were just cut open so many times, and all these goals came from their own mistakes. Stoke's 2 most prolific players lately have been Nick Powell and Stephen Fletcher, so I think it was, you know, quite fitting that each of them were on the goal sheet for this one here today. With Luton, I think they're part of a few clubs in the Championship at the moment who have been sort of comfortable mid-table for the majority of the season, but with the way that their form's tailed off, quite similar to a couple of others, you know, Preston and Bristol City as other examples, there could very much be this flipping around of teams. You know, those sides who are just sitting above the relegation zone for the majority of the season, as they've started to pick up, I think we could see a few of them flipping around in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, Luton do need to find some form out of somewhere, but for Stoke, a lot of positives from that game. But those were all the matches that did take place in the Championship over this weekend. In terms of my result of the weekend, I think I've got to give that to Huddersfield. You know, there were some big results this weekend, but putting 4 goals past the best defensive side in the league deserves a lot of credit. And it's going to be the double whammy for them, because I'm also going to give Dwayne Holmes the goal of the week for that ridiculous second goal he scored against them. Top stuff there. So do get all your thoughts in the comments down below in terms of what you made of your guys' performance. So do get all your thoughts in the comments down below in terms of what you made of your team's performance. But without any further ado, let's jump into my midweek score predictions. So let's start out at St Andrews. We've got Birmingham going up against Norwich. We'll see if Birmingham can bounce off the back of that impressive result against Sheff Wednesday. But going up against top of the league Norwich, who are playing with a lot of confidence and a real spark about their play, is a different ask, obviously. Their forward-thinking players, especially in the good, rich vein of form Team Pukki and Buendia, and I'll throw Todd Cantwell into that category as well. I'm going to go 2-0 Norwich in this game. I think they probably probably do get through this one, especially with Birmingham's quite poor home record so far. Derby against Huddersfield is a really tough one to call now after the weekend, because Huddersfield were absolutely dazzling. The question is, will they revert back to type in this one, or will they continue to build off that impressive performance? Obviously, I thought that Derby got a little bit unlucky with their game against Watford in midweek, and they'll obviously have a point to prove in this one. I'm going to back Derby. The bottom of the Championship's just been so topsy-turvy, but Huddersfield could well prove me wrong and bounce off the back of that impressive performance in the weekend. I'm going to go 2-1, but I could be proved wrong there. Middlesbrough up against Bristol City. I think I've got to be back in Middlesbrough here, although if Bristol City do hire Pearson and he is in charge for this one, we could see a little bit of a bounce back from Bristol City. Having said that, I'm going to go 2-0 Middlesbrough in that game. Luton up against Millwall. Luton in desperate need of a result here, really, given how their form has tailed off recently. Quite a really shoddy performance, actually, over the weekend, shipping 3 goals against Stoke. I'm going to go for a draw in that one. Millwall still on this decent unbeaten run, but their game against Wycombe was a little bit frustrating in the weekend as well. Rotherham up against Forest. Now, Rotherham still find themselves in a bit of a peculiar position because they are in the bottom 3, but they do have the advantage of having 2 games in hand on some of the teams above them. Now, I've liked Forest lately. I think that they're being a little bit more adventurous with their forward play, albeit they're maybe not scoring as many goals as they could be, but they are committing more bodies to their attacks, and I think that may pay off for them in the long run. I'm going to go 1-0 Forest in that game. Then, as our last game on Tuesday, we got Wycombe going up against Reading. Reading, we mentioned it when we were talking about their game, but they've got a decent couple of fixtures coming up now where they need to get back into that sort of winning flow. You know, if they drop all too many more points, that top 6 place could be coming in jeopardy. I am going to back Reading for this one, although Wycombe very capable of throwing a spanner in the works, so I'm going to go 2-0 Reading. Then into Wednesday's matches. Now, this game could be quite telling for the playoff picture coming the end of the season. We got Barnsley going up against Stoke. Barnsley on this fantastic run of form currently. They did get past Bristol City at the weekend. I thought they probably could have had a couple more goals in that game, but Stoke obviously were fantastic and got a bit more of their goal scoring flow going about them in that game against Luton. Tough game to predict, this one. I'm just going to edge Barnsley, but I wouldn't be all too surprised to see that one finishing as a draw in there, but I'm just going to go Barnsley 1-0 in that game. Brentford up against Sheff Wednesday. Both teams in need of a result here, and I think that Brentford might end up being a bit frustrated from this one. I can see Wednesday maybe getting a goal from a set piece or something like that, and it's a question of, can Brentford be as inventive without Ivan Toney's goal scoring touch going forward? I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw in that game. I also think that Swansea may come a little bit unstuck in their game against Coventry. I was really impressed with Coventry's performance against Brentford at the weekend. If they go into this game with the same sort of intensity and Swansea are as leaky as the back as they looked against Huddersfield, I'm going to go for another draw in that game. I'm going to go for a 1-1, so back in both Brentford and Swansea to drop points once again. Next up, we then go to Ewood Park. We got Blackburn going up against Watford. I think that Watford are just churning out the results at this point in time, aren't they? They're clinical whenever they do get their chances moving forward. I think that that pattern probably continues against a pretty out-of-form Blackburn side. I'm going to go 2-0 Watford in that game. Then to an absolutely huge game with the playoff picture. We got Bournemouth going up against Cardiff. Now, if Cardiff win this match, it's blown completely wide open to quite a few other Championship sides, but obviously Cardiff will then be put into pole position. The appointment of Jonathan Woodgate, we're still all sort of waiting to see long term if that's going to pay off for them this season, but Mick McCarthy's got this Cardiff side playing at the moment, and I think they might get through this game. You know, it was impressive stuff from them at the weekend, beating North End. I'm going to go 2-1 Cardiff in that game. That should be an absolute cracker. And as our last game to go ahead and predict, we got my side North End going up against QPR. Now for me, Preston were as bad as we've been all season at the weekend, and QPR are in the form of their lives at the moment, so I'm hoping it will be typical of the Championship for Preston to actually go on and win this one, but realistically we couldn't have played QPR at a worse point of the season because they are absolutely flying at this point in time. They've been scoring more goals, obviously. Said the Eng still pulling out the worldies week in, week out. I'm reluctantly going to say that QPR are going to win this one. I'm going to go 2-1 to the away side and just hoping that I'm proven wrong here. But yeah, it's going to be a big week for Preston and Alex Neil, but I think that QPR probably edged that one. But as you can see to the side of me, those are my Championship predictions for what I see happening in midweek. Do get yours in the comments down below for a chance to get involved in the next video and get yourself onto that prediction leaderboard. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Also, please do subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. We are so close now to that 30k mark. It is right within touching distance. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.